Captain Hyun-woo stood in the center of the massive council chamber, his blue uniform crisp against the alien architecture that surrounded him. The chamber was built like a giant dome, with 12 raised platforms arranged in a circle. On each platform sat representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy. Their eyes, tentacles, and various sensory organs all focused on him with obvious distaste. Hyun-woo had been a diplomat for 15 years, but he had never felt this much hostility in one room. The air itself seemed thick with disapproval. Behind him, 3 other humans stood quietly, his advisors and translators. They looked small and fragile compared to the massive aliens around them. "The human species," announced Veltar, the Velthari, representative, "has proven itself unworthy of membership in this council." Veltar was 8 feet tall with silver skin and 4 arms. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never been questioned. "They are too chaotic, too unpredictable. They make decisions based on emotions rather than logic." Hyun-woo kept his face calm, even though anger burned in his chest. "Honorable council members, humanity has served this galaxy faithfully for 23 years. We have helped maintain peace. We have fought against pirates and raiders. We have shared our technology and our knowledge freely." "That is exactly the problem," said Nexaris, the Nexari strategist. Unlike Veltar, she was small and thin, with pale green skin and large black eyes that seemed to calculate everything. "You share too much. You take too many risks. You involve yourselves in conflicts that do not concern you." Other council members began to speak, their voices overlapping in a chorus of complaints. The Thrakari representative, a being that looked like a walking crystal formation, complained that humans were too quick to help weaker species. The Molari delegate, whose species resembled giant flowers, said humans asked too many questions about things that should remain private. "You do not understand your place," rumbled the Corvin ambassador, a creature the size of a small building. "The galaxy has rules, order, systems that have worked for thousands of years. Humans ignore these systems. You create chaos wherever you go." Hyun-woo listened to each complaint, feeling the weight of decades of diplomatic work crumbling around him. Back on Earth, Admiral So-jin was watching this meeting through a holographic connection. Hyun-woo could see her image in the corner of his eye, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire life working toward this moment, when humanity would finally have a voice in galactic affairs. "The vote has been called," Veltar announced. "All those in favor of removing humanity from the Galactic Council and expelling them from Council space, indicate now." One by one, lights appeared above the platforms. Red lights meant yes, humanity should be expelled. Green lights meant no, humanity should stay. Hyun-woo watched as red light after red light appeared. The Velthari voted yes. The Nexari voted yes. The Thrakari, the Molari, the Corvin, all yes. Finally, the counting stopped. 8 red lights, 4 green lights. "The motion passes," Veltar said with satisfaction. "By the authority of this council, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human settlements, bases, and facilities in council space must be evacuated within 30 standard days. Any humans remaining after this deadline will be considered criminals and dealt with accordingly." Hyun-woo felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Around the chamber, some aliens looked pleased. Others looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke up to change the decision. "This is a mistake," Hyun-woo said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Humanity has been your ally. We have bled for this galaxy. We have died for it. And this is how you repay us? Your service is acknowledged, Nexaris said coldly. But your species is simply too dangerous to remain among civilized races. You will be compensated for any property you must abandon. Compensated? Hyunwoo laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think credits can replace 23 years of friendship? You think money can pay for the lives we lost defending your worlds? Veltar's four arms crossed over his chest. The decision is final. You have 30 days. Admiral So-Jin's hologram stepped forward, even though she was millions of miles away on Earth. Council members, I ask you to reconsider. Humanity has proven its worth time and again. Just 6 months ago, we helped destroy the Ravager pirate fleet that was terrorizing the outer colonies. We did this without being asked, without expecting payment. And that is exactly why you must leave, said the Corvin representative. You act without permission. You make decisions that affect the entire galaxy without consulting anyone. This cannot continue. So we are being punished for helping people? So-Jin asked. You are being removed because you cannot follow rules. Veltar replied. The galaxy needs order, stability. Humanity brings chaos. Hyunwoo looked around the chamber one more time. Some of these beings had been his friends, or so he thought. They had shared meals together, discussed philosophy, even laughed at each other's jokes. Now they looked at him like he was something dirty they had found on their shoes. Very well, he said finally. Humanity will leave your precious council space. But remember this day. Remember that you chose fear over friendship. You chose isolation over cooperation. And remember that when trouble comes, and it always does, you decided you did not want humanity's help. Is that a threat? Veltar demanded, rising to his full height. No, Hyunwoo said quietly. It is a prediction. The human delegation left the chamber in silence. As they walked through the corridors of the massive space station that served as the Council's headquarters, other beings moved out of their way. Some looked ashamed, others looked relieved, a few looked almost sad. In the shuttle back to their ship, one of Hyunwoo's advisors finally spoke. What do we do now, sir? Hyunwoo stared out the window at the stars beyond. We go home. We pack up everything we have built out here, and we find somewhere new to live. Where? The advisor asked. I do not know yet, Hyunwoo admitted. But it will be somewhere far from here. Somewhere we can be ourselves without apologizing for it. Back on the council station, the representatives were already discussing how to divide up the territories humanity would be leaving behind. They talked about mining rights and trade routes and strategic positions. None of them mentioned the humans, who would be losing their homes. None of them wondered what humanity might do with all that anger and disappointment. None of them considered that maybe, just maybe, they had made the biggest mistake in galactic history, but they would learn soon. Enough. Dr. Minho had never organized anything bigger than a medical conference. Now he was trying to move 2.3 billion people across half the galaxy in 30 days. The command center on New Sol Station buzzed with activity. Hundreds of screens showed the status of human colonies scattered across 147 worlds. Each screen represented millions of lives that needed to be relocated, and Minho felt the weight of every single one. Report from Harmony Colony, called out Lieutenant Park from her communication station. They are requesting permission to take their orbital factories with them. Granted, Minho said without hesitation. Tell them to take everything. Every bolt, every wire, every piece of equipment they can carry. Around the command center, other coordinators were having similar conversations. The aliens had expected humans to simply pack their personal belongings and leave. They were quickly learning how wrong they were. On the mining world of Prosperity 7, engineer Yunji supervised the dismantling of the entire atmospheric processing station. The massive facility had taken 5 years to build and could produce breathable air for 1 million people. Now, piece by piece, it was being loaded onto cargo ships. "Are you sure about this?" asked Taemin, the colony governor. He was a thin man in his 50s who had spent the last 15 years turning Prosperity 7 from a barren rock into a thriving community. "This station cost us everything. If we take it apart, the planet will be uninhabitable within months." Yunji wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at the governor with tired eyes. "That is the point, sir. The aliens want us gone because we are too unpredictable. Let us show them exactly how unpredictable we can be." The work continued around the clock. Giant mining machines were broken down into portable pieces. Entire factory complexes were loaded onto transport ships. Even the orbital elevators, massive cables stretching from planet surfaces to space stations, were being carefully removed and packed away. On the agricultural world of Green Haven, farmers were doing something that made even less sense to outside observers. They were taking the soil, not just samples, actual tons of specially treated earth that had taken decades to develop. "The microorganisms in this soil are unique to our farming methods," explained Chief Agriculturalist Ji Young to a confused alien observer who had come to monitor the evacuation. "Without them, this planet cannot support the crops that feed the E sector." The alien, a Thrakari named Shimkar, shifted uncomfortably. His crystal-like body reflected the sunlight as he watched human machines scoop up acre after acre of topsoil. "Surely you cannot take all of it?" "Watch us," Ji Young said simply. Word of what humanity was doing spread quickly through the galactic news networks. What had started as a simple evacuation was becoming something else entirely. Humans were not just leaving, they were taking their entire civilization with them. Back on New Seoul Station, Minho received a priority message from Admiral So Jin on Earth. Her face appeared on his screen, and she looked as tired as he felt. "How are we doing, Doctor?" she asked. "Better than expected, Admiral," Minho replied. "The evacuation is ahead of schedule, but the alien governments are starting to panic. They thought they were getting rid of some troublesome neighbors. Instead, they are watching entire solar systems shut down." So Jin nodded grimly. "I have been receiving complaints all morning. The Velthari are furious that we are taking the antimatter generators from the Bright Star system. The Nexari say we are committing economic terrorism by dismantling the trade stations." "What did you tell them?" Minho asked. "I told them they wanted us gone, and we are leaving. How we leave is our choice, not theirs." The complaints were understandable. Human colonies had not just been settlements. They had been the economic engines of entire regions. Humans built the factories that produced essential goods. They operated the mines that extracted rare materials. They maintained the space stations that allowed faster-than-light travel between distant worlds. Now all of that was disappearing. On the industrial world of Iron Mountain, the evacuation was causing a crisis that spread to dozens of nearby systems. The massive fusion plants that provided power to half the sector were being shut down one by one. Without them, entire civilizations would be plunged into darkness. "We need at least 6 months to build replacement facilities," pleaded Mortek, a desperate Molari official. "You cannot just turn off the power to 50 billion people." Supervisor Dong Su, a weathered man who had spent 30 years maintaining the power grid, shook his head. We told the Council this would happen. We warned them that human infrastructure was connected to everything. They chose to ignore us. But innocent people will suffer, Mortek insisted. Yes, Dongsu agreed sadly. They will, and that is the Council's fault, not ours. The supervisor began shutting down the final reactor. As the lights dimmed across the facility, he felt no satisfaction, only sadness for the chaos that would follow. Meanwhile, in deep space, the human fleet was growing larger every day. Transport ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, and even converted warships all carried the remnants of human civilization toward the edge of known space. Commander Yoon Sok watched from the bridge of the transport ship New Hope as another convoy joined their exodus. The fleet now stretched for millions of kilometers, a river of lights moving steadily away from the galactic center. "Where are we going, Commander?" asked his navigation officer, a young woman named Hai Rin. "Away," Yoon Seok replied. "Far away from species who think order is more important than friendship." The commander stared at the star charts on his screen. Beyond the edge of Council space lay the Galactic Rim, regions that had never been fully explored. It was dangerous territory, full of unknown hazards and uncharted worlds, but it was also free territory where humans could live without asking permission from anyone. As the days passed, the full scale of humanity's departure became clear. They had not just left the Council's territory. They had taken everything that made those territories valuable. Factories stood empty. Mines lay abandoned. Trade routes that had operated for centuries suddenly had no endpoints. The economic chaos was immediate and devastating. Currency values crashed as markets realized that entire sectors of the galactic economy had simply vanished. Species that had depended on human goods and services found themselves unable to maintain their standard of living. On the Council station, emergency sessions were called to address the crisis. But it was too late to stop what they had started. The human fleet was already beyond the reach of Council space, moving toward regions where no government could touch them. Veltar stood before the emergency assembly, his silver skin pale with stress. "This is not what we intended," he admitted. "We wanted them to leave quietly, not to destroy everything they had built." "Did you think they would abandon 40 years of work without taking it with them?" asked one of the few representatives who had voted against the expulsion. "Did you think they would leave gifts for the people who exiled them?" The chamber fell silent. Finally, Nexaris spoke up. "Perhaps we underestimated human nature." "Perhaps," agreed Veltar. "But it is too late to change our decision now." Outside the Council chamber, the galaxy was learning a hard lesson about what happens when you exile the species that keeps your civilization running. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the rim, humanity was preparing to show them what they could build. When no one was watching, Scout Commander Ji-hoon had been exploring empty space for 6 months when his sensors detected something impossible. His small exploration ship, the Wanderer, had been mapping the regions beyond the galactic rim when the anomaly appeared on his screens. "That cannot be right," he muttered, checking his instruments again. According to his readings, there was a massive artificial structure on the dead world below, a planet that supposedly had never supported life. Ji-hoon was a careful man, trained to investigate strange discoveries without taking unnecessary risks. He had found 17 new worlds during the human exodus, but none of them had shown signs of ancient civilization. This was different. The planet looked normal from orbit: rocky surface, thin atmosphere, no signs of current life. But his deep scan, sensors were detecting geometric patterns beneath the surface, structures that were clearly not natural. "Control, this is Wanderer," he said into his communication system. "I am detecting artificial structures on the fourth planet of system designation RIM-77, requesting permission to investigate." The response came back 30 minutes later, the time it took for radio signals to reach the main human fleet. Admiral Sojin's voice was clear despite the distance. "Permission granted, Commander. But be careful. We cannot afford to lose scouts to unknown dangers." Ji-hoon landed his ship near the strongest readings and stepped out onto the alien soil. The atmosphere was breathable, barely, and the gravity was close to Earth normal. But the silence was complete. No wind, no sounds of life, nothing but the crunch of his boots on ancient rock. The structures were not on the surface. They were buried under thousands of years of accumulated dust and debris. Ji-hoon used his portable scanner to map the underground complex, and what he found made his hands shake with excitement. The buried city was enormous. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with buildings that followed no architectural style he recognized. But more importantly, the power sources were still active. After all these years, something was still running down there. Ji-hoon called for backup. Within 2 days, a full archaeological team had arrived, led by Dr. Soo-young, humanity's leading expert on alien cultures. With her came Security Chief Do-hyun and a squad of Marines, just in case whatever lived down there was not friendly. The entrance they found led to a vast underground chamber filled with strange machinery. The walls were covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. Emergency lighting strips still functioned, casting eerie shadows across surfaces that had not seen visitors in millions of years. "The technology is incredible," Soo-young whispered as she ran her scanner over the alien devices. "The power systems are more advanced than anything in Council space, and these symbols, they are not just decorative, they are some kind of information storage system." Do-hyun kept his weapon ready as they explored deeper into the complex. The security chief was a big man with scars on his face from fighting space pirates, and he did not like places where his enemies might be hiding around every corner. "Doctor, how old do you think this place is?" he asked. Soo-young paused her scanning and looked around the chamber with wonder. "Based on the decay patterns and the sediment layers above us, I would guess this city has been abandoned for at least 3 million years, maybe longer." They found the main computer core in the center of the complex. It was a crystalline structure the size of a building, still humming with power after all these eons. Soo-young approached it carefully, her translation equipment working to decode the alien symbols that covered its surface. "This is not just a computer," she realized after hours of analysis. "It is a library, a complete record of the species that built this place." The translation process took days, but gradually the story emerged. The builders called themselves the Architects, and they had once been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had created technologies that could reshape matter and energy at will. They had built cities that floated in space and machines that could think for themselves. But something had destroyed them. The records spoke of creatures called the Great Devourers, beings that consumed entire star systems, converting matter and energy into computational power for purposes the Architects never understood. The Devourers had appeared from beyond the galaxy, moving slowly but inevitably toward its center. "Look at this," Soo-young called out, pointing to a section of the wall where new symbols had appeared. "It is a star map, and these red markers, They show where the Devourers attacked. Ji-hoon studied the map with growing unease. The red markers formed a clear pattern, moving from the outer rim toward the galactic core. The final markers showed the Devourers reaching the center of the galaxy, where the most advanced civilizations lived. "What happened to the architects?" Do-hyun asked. Soo-young translated more of the records before answering. "They tried to fight. They created weapons that could destroy planets and shields that could stop stars from burning. But nothing worked against the Devourers. In the end, they retreated here, to the very edge of the galaxy, and built this library to warn whoever came after them. The most shocking discovery came when Soo-young accessed the genetic records stored in the computer core. The images that appeared on the crystalline display made all three humans step back in surprise. "Those are Velthari," Ji-hoon said, pointing to one of the alien forms shown in the records. "And those look like Nexari and Thrakari." Soo-young nodded grimly. "The current council species are not the original inhabitants of their worlds. They are refugees. Their ancestors fled here when the Devourers consumed their original home systems. The records showed the full scope of the ancient disaster. Billions of beings had fled their dying worlds, seeking safety in the unexplored regions at the galaxy's edge. Over millions of years, they had rebuilt their civilizations and forgotten their origins. They had become the dominant species of the new galaxy, never knowing that they were living in the ruins of something much greater. But the most important discovery was yet to come. Deep in the computer core, Soo-young found construction plans for weapons and defenses that the architects had never had time to build. Technologies that could manipulate space and time itself. "This is incredible," she breathed as she copied the files to her portable storage device. They were building something called a reality engine, a machine that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area. With this technology, matter and energy become malleable, subject to conscious will rather than natural law. "Could it stop these Devourers?" Do-hyun asked. "Maybe," Soo-young replied. "The architects thought so. They were working on a final plan when the Devourers reached them, but they never got the chance to test it." Ji-hoon was studying another section of the display. "Doctor, you need to see this. These are recent sensor readings from the deep space. Monitoring stations the architects left behind. The readings showed massive objects moving through the void between galaxies. Objects the size of solar systems, following the same path the Devourers had taken millions of years ago. They were still far away, but they were definitely headed for the galaxy. "They are coming back," Soo-young whispered. The three humans stood in silence, absorbing the implications of their discovery. Somewhere in deep space, ancient enemies were returning to finish what they had started. The current galactic civilization had no idea what was coming, and based on the architect records, their technology would be useless against the threat. But humanity now possessed something the architects had never completed, the plans for weapons that could fight back. "We need to contact the fleet immediately," Ji-hoon said. "Admiral So-jin needs to know about this." As they prepared to leave the ancient library, Soo-young made one final discovery. Hidden in the deepest files of the computer core was a message, written in simple pictographs that any intelligent species could understand. "To whoever finds this record," the message read, "we have failed, but we have left you the tools to succeed where we could not. The Devourers will return. When they do, remember that intelligence and creativity are the only weapons they cannot consume. Use them wisely." Do-hyun looked around the empty chamber one last time. Do you think the council will believe us when we tell them? Su Young shook her head sadly. After what they did to us, they will probably think it is some kind of human trick. Then we will have to stop the devourers ourselves, Ji-hoon said simply. As they returned to their ships, none of them spoke about the magnitude of the task ahead. How could a single species, exiled and alone, possibly defend an entire galaxy from enemies that had destroyed the most advanced civilization in history? But as their ships lifted off from the dead world, carrying the architect technology toward the human fleet, they carried something else as well. Hope that humanity's greatest weakness might also be their greatest strength. The architects had failed because they followed rules and logic. The devourers had defeated them because they could predict what logical beings would do. But humans were not logical. And perhaps that would make all the difference. General Wu Jin stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital platform, watching humanity transform an entire solar system into something that had never existed before. 2 years had passed since the discovery of the architect. Ruins, and the human fleet had become something far more impressive than a collection of refugee ships. The Arsenal world, as they called it now, was the 4th planet in the system they had claimed. It was a barren rock when they arrived, but human engineering had turned it into the most advanced manufacturing center in the galaxy. Massive factories covered its surface, producing ships and weapons based on hybrid human architect technology. Status. Report! Wu Jin called to his aide, Colonel Jae Sung. The shipyards have completed another 50 vessels this month. Jae Sung replied, reading from his datapad. The new destroyers are testing beyond all expectations. And Dr. Jun Seo says the reality engine prototype will be ready for trials next week. Wu Jin nodded with satisfaction. Building this new fleet had been the greatest challenge of his military career, but it was also the most important. Every day brought them closer to the time when the devourers would return, and humanity had to be ready. In the research facilities deep beneath the Arsenal world surface, Dr. Jun Seo was solving problems that had seemed impossible when they first found the architect technology. The reality engine was not just a weapon, it was a fundamental change in how technology could work. The breakthrough came when we stopped thinking like engineers and started thinking like artists, Jun Seo explained to the small group of scientists gathered around the prototype device. The architects were trying to build machines that could manipulate reality through logical processes. But reality does not work logically. It works through relationships and connections that change based on observation and intent. The prototype reality engine looked nothing like traditional human technology. It was a crystalline structure similar to the architect computers, but grown rather than built, shaped by human intuition rather than mathematical precision. Inside its core, quantum fields fluctuated in patterns that human consciousness could direct and control. "Watch this," Jun Seo said, placing his hand on the control interface. The device responded to his thoughts, and suddenly a section of the laboratory wall became transparent, then liquid, then solid again. "We are not changing the laws of physics. We are changing which laws apply in a specific area. The wall is still made of the same atoms, but those atoms are now following different rules." Captain Yejin was the first pilot chosen to test the new ships equipped with reality engine technology. She had been flying experimental aircraft since she was 25, and now at 40, she was considered the best test pilot in human space. But nothing had prepared her for what the new ships could do. The test ship, called Possibility, looked like a work of art rather than a military vessel. Its hull curved in impossible angles, and its surface seemed to shift between different materials, depending on how the light hit it. Inside, the control systems responded to thought as much as to physical input. Beginning phase test, Ye Jin reported to the monitoring station as she lifted off from the Arsenal world. All systems show normal readings. But normal was a relative term. As possibility climbed towards space, reality around it became flexible. The ship did not push through atmosphere. It convinced the atmosphere to move aside. It did not burn fuel to achieve acceleration. It changed the local definition of what acceleration meant. Phase successful, Ye Jin reported with excitement in her voice. Beginning spatial displacement test. She engaged the ship's most advanced system, and possibility simply stopped existing in its current location. One moment it was climbing through the planet's upper atmosphere. The next, it was floating in space near the system's outer asteroid belt. Impossible, breathed Dr. Min-jae, the lead physicist monitoring the test. She traveled 50 million kilometers in less than a second, but our instruments show no acceleration, no energy expenditure, nothing. The ship just was somewhere else. Not impossible, Junseo corrected with a smile. Just following different rules than we are used to. The tests continued for months as humanity built and trained with their new technology. But they were not the only ones preparing for war. Deep in space, automated monitoring stations left by the architects were sending increasingly urgent warnings. The great devourers had been detected at the galaxy's edge, moving slowly but steadily toward the center. They were still years away, but their approach was undeniable. More troubling, the monitoring stations reported that there were more devourers this time, hundreds of the massive constructs, each one capable of consuming entire star systems. Admiral Sojin reviewed the reports in her command center on the mobile capital ship Unity. At 72, she should have retired years ago, but the survival of humanity, and possibly the galaxy, depended on the decisions she made now. "How many ships do we have ready for combat?" she asked General Wu Jin. 1,500 vessels equipped with reality engine technology, he replied. Another 3,000 using advanced conventional weapons. It sounds impressive, but compared to what we are facing, it will have to be enough, Sojin said firmly. We knew from the beginning that we would be outnumbered. Our advantage has to come from being unpredictable. The Admiral pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated the probable path the Devourers would take as they moved toward the center. Their route would take them through Council space first, consuming the civilizations that had expelled humanity. Have there been any responses to our warning messages? Sojin asked. Communications Officer Hyan-Su shook his head. The Council species are still refusing to acknowledge our transmissions. They think this is some kind of elaborate human deception designed to trick them into accepting us back. Sojin was not surprised. 2 years of isolation had convinced the Council that humanity was bitter and seeking revenge. They could not imagine that humans would try to warn the species that had exiled them. What about independent colonies and smaller species? She asked. Some of them are listening, Hyun-Soo replied. The Keth Alliance has asked for detailed information about the threat. The Free Traders Union wants to know if we can provide protection for their shipping routes. But the major powers, the Velthari, Nexari, Thrakari, they all dismiss our warnings as human lies. In the training facilities on Arsenal World, human pilots and soldiers were learning to fight in ways that no military in galactic history had ever imagined. Reality engine technology did not just change their weapons, It changed how combat itself worked. Lieutenant Bo Ram was one of the new reality engineers, specialists trained to manipulate local space-time during battle. She stood in the center of a training chamber, facing holographic enemies that moved and fought like the devourer constructs described in the architect records. "Remember," called her instructor, Commander Kyung-ho, "do not think about what you want to destroy. Think about what you want to create. The reality engine responds to positive intent, not negative emotion." Bo-Ram nodded and focused on the approaching enemy holograms. Instead of trying to blow them up, she imagined space around them becoming solid, trapping them in crystalline prisons. The reality engine responded, and the holographic devourers found themselves encased in walls of transformed vacuum. "Good!" Kyung-ho called out. "Now free them and try something different." Bo-Ram dissolved the crystal prisons, and this time imagined the enemy constructs experiencing time differently than the rest of the universe. The reality engine complied, and the holograms began moving in slow motion while everything else continued. At normal speed, training sessions like this were happening all across the human fleet. Soldiers learned to walk through walls by convincing matter to become permeable. Pilots learned to make their ships invisible by changing how light interacted with their hulls. Engineers learned to repair damaged equipment by reversing the flow of entropy in localized areas. But the most important preparation was psychological. Humans were training themselves to think in ways that would be completely unpredictable to the devourers. The architects failed because they approached every problem logically, explained Dr. Su Young in one of her lectures to military commanders. The devourers could predict their actions because logic follows patterns, but human creativity does not follow patterns. It makes connections that seem random, finds solutions that appear impossible, and creates beauty from chaos. "So our strategy is to be crazy?" asked Commander Sung-ho with a skeptical smile. "Not crazy," Su Young corrected. "Creative. The devourers understand destruction and consumption. They understand logical progression and mathematical certainty. But they do not understand art, imagination, or the human ability to see possibilities that do not yet exist." As the months passed and the devourer fleet drew closer to the galaxy, humanity's preparations entered their final phase. The Arsenal world now produced new ships every day. Training programs had created thousands of warriors who could fight with weapons that rewrote reality itself. And deep in secure facilities, scientists worked on projects so ambitious that even other humans thought they were impossible. Commander Sung-ho guided his ship through the checkpoint at the edge of Council space, feeling the familiar weight of hostile eyes upon him. The vessel he commanded, called Truth-Bearer, was one of the new reality engine ships, but he had disguised its true capabilities to look like an old human transport. The last thing he wanted was to give the Council species something else to fear. 18 months had passed since the first Devourer scouts had been detected at the galaxy's edge. Now they were close enough that even Council sensors could pick them up, though the aliens still refused to accept what they were seeing. "Council Station Control, this is Commander Sung-ho of the Truth-Bearer, requesting permission to dock," he transmitted on the standard frequency. The response took several minutes, and when it came, the voice was cold and unwelcoming. "Human vessel, you are not authorized to enter Council space. Leave immediately, or we will consider you a hostile force." "Control, I carry urgent information about the objects your deep space sensors have been detecting. Information that could save billions of lives." Another long pause. "Stand by, human vessel." Sung-ho waited patiently as Council officials argued about what to do with him. Through his ship's sensors, he could detect the massive fleet of Council warships surrounding the station. They were trying to look threatening, but Sung Ho could see the fear beneath their aggressive posture. Finally, a different voice came over the communication channel. "Human Commander, this is Admiral Nex Aris. You will be permitted to dock, but you will submit to complete scanning and inspection. Any sign of deception or hostile intent will result in the immediate destruction of your vessel." "Understood. Admiral, I have nothing to hide." The docking process took hours as Council security teams went over every inch of Truthbearer with scanning equipment. They found nothing dangerous, mainly because they did not know what to look for. The reality engine technology was so far beyond their understanding that their sensors classified it as decorative crystals. Sung Ho was escorted to the council chamber by a squad of Velthari guards who made no effort to hide their contempt. The chamber itself looked exactly as it had 2 years ago when Captain Yunwoo had been humiliated here. The same raised platforms, the same arrogant representatives, the same atmosphere of superior disdain. But there were differences, too. The representatives looked older, more tired. The confidence that had radiated from them during humanity's expulsion was gone, replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. "Speak quickly, human," commanded Veltar from his platform. "We have more important matters to attend to than listening to your lies." Sung Ho activated his portable holographic projector, filling the center of the chamber with images from the architect ruins. "These are not lies. This is the historical record of what destroyed the galaxy's previous civilization 3 million years ago." The images showed the ancient war between the architects and the devourers. Entire star systems consumed, converted into computational matrices for unknown purposes. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years wiped out in decades. "Clever special effects," sneered Mortek, the Molari representative, "but we are not children to be frightened by human fantasies." "The objects your sensors have detected match these historical records exactly," Sung Ho continued, ignoring the interruption. "They are the same devourers that destroyed the architects. They are returning to finish what they started." Nexaris leaned forward on her platform, her large black eyes calculating. "Even if your story were true, which it is not, what would you have us do? Surrender to human authority as your Admiral Sojin demanded?" "I would have you survive," Sung Ho replied simply. "Your current military technology cannot stop the devourers. The architects had weapons that could destroy planets, and they still lost. But humanity has found something the architects never had. A way to fight enemies that exist partially outside normal reality." The chamber erupted in derisive laughter. The Corvin representative, massive and crystalline, rumbled with amusement. "Humans who were kicked out of civilized space for being too primitive claim to have technology superior to the greatest civilization in galactic history? This is absurd even by human standards." Sung Ho felt his patience beginning to wear thin, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I can prove what I am telling you. Allow me to demonstrate our new capabilities." "Demonstrate how?" Veltar asked, suspiciously. "Your station's defensive shields are rated to stop any known weapon. Let me show you what humanity has learned to build." The council representatives exchanged glances. Finally, Veltar nodded. "Very well. But if this is some kind of attack, your people will pay the price for your deception." Sung Ho contacted his ship and gave a simple order. "Jin Woo, activate Demonstration Protocol 1. On the bridge of Truthbearer, Communications Officer Jin Woo nodded and touched a control on his console. Outside the station, Space itself began to change. The massive defensive shields that protected the Council Station, energy barriers that could stop antimatter weapons, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed or deactivated, but gone as if they had never been built. Alarms began sounding throughout the station as security systems registered the impossible. The shields were still running, still drawing power, still registering as active on all monitors. But they were no longer there. "Turn them back on," ordered Veltar, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. Sung-Ho nodded to his communicator. Instantly, the shields reappeared exactly as they had been before. The council chamber fell silent. For the first time in 2 years, the alien representatives were looking at a human with something other than contempt. "How?" whispered Nexaris. "We learned to change the rules instead of just following them," Sung-Ho explained. "The Devourers can consume matter and energy, but they cannot consume human imagination. They can predict logical responses, but they cannot predict creativity." He activated his holographic projector again, this time showing images of the approaching Devourer fleet. The massive constructs were clearly visible now, each one the size of a small moon, moving steadily toward the galactic center. "They will reach the outer colonies in approximately 6 months, Sung-Ho said. "The first major systems will fall within a year. If you continue to refuse our help, half the galaxy will be consumed within 5 years. And what price would humanity demand for this help?" asked Veltar carefully. "The same terms Admiral So-Jin offered before. Complete dissolution of the Galactic Council and acknowledgement of human authority in military matters. In return, we will defend all sapient species against the Devourer threat." The chamber exploded into angry shouts. Representatives accused humans of using the crisis to seize power, of creating the threat themselves, of lying about everything to get revenge for their expulsion. Sung-Ho waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "You have 6 months to decide. After that, it will be too late to evacuate the outer systems." "Evacuate?" Nexaris asked. "You mean abandon entire star systems to these Devourers?" "If you refuse our protection, yes. Humanity will defend the species that accept our authority. The others will have to fend for themselves." "This is blackmail," accused Veltar. "No," Sung-Ho replied calmly. "This is reality. The Devourers do not care about your politics or your pride. They only care about consuming everything in their path. We are offering you a chance to survive." The council session dissolved into chaos as representatives argued among themselves. Some wanted to accept human terms immediately. Others insisted it was all an elaborate hoax. Still others proposed finding alternative solutions that did not require surrendering to their former enemies. Sung-Ho was escorted back to his ship without a formal answer, though the message was clear enough. The Council would rather face extinction than admit they had been wrong about humanity. As Truthbearer departed Council space, Sung-Ho composed his report to Admiral So-Jin. The Council had been warned. They had seen proof of humanity's new capabilities and evidence of the approaching threat. Their refusal to act was their own choice. But even as his ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, the first Outer Rim colonies were already going silent. The initial attacks came without warning. Frontier settlements that had existed for centuries simply stopped transmitting. When Council investigation teams reached these worlds, they found something worse than destruction. They found nothing at all. The planets were still there, still, orbiting their stars. But every trace of civilization had been erased. Buildings, vehicles, people, even organic matter in the soil, all gone as if they had never existed. Only bare rock remained, stripped of everything that had once made these worlds home to millions of beings. On the council station, emergency sessions ran around the clock as reports came in from across the outer territories. System after system was being consumed by something that left no trace of its passage. 17 colonies have gone silent in the past month, reported Intelligence Director Kethmore to the assembled representatives. In every case, our investigation teams found the same thing: planets stripped of all complex matter and energy. What about survivors? Asked Veltar. There are none. Whatever is doing this leaves nothing behind. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This was not invasion. Admiral Hyojin stood in the command center of the human battleship Defiance, watching the Galactic Council's civilization collapse in real time. The massive display screens showed the current state of Council space, with red zones marking systems that had gone dark. What had started as isolated incidents on the outer rim was now a flood of destruction rolling toward the galaxy's heart. "Status report," she called to her intelligence officer. 47 major systems have been consumed. In the past 6 months, reported Commander Kyung-soo, his voice grim. The rate of loss is accelerating. The Devourers are no longer limiting themselves to frontier worlds. They have begun targeting industrial centers and population hubs. Hyojin nodded grimly. The pattern was exactly what the Architect records had predicted. The Devourers would start with isolated targets to test local defenses, then move quickly to eliminate major threats once they understood the galaxy's military capabilities. "What about Council military responses?" she asked. "Complete failures across the board," Kyung-soo replied, calling up tactical reports on his screen. The Velthari 4th Fleet engaged a Devourer construct near Bright Star 3. All 57 ships were consumed within minutes. The Nexari attempted a coordinated attack using antimatter weapons. The Devourers absorbed the energy and used it to accelerate their advance. The reports made for sobering reading. Every tactic the Council species tried failed catastrophically. Conventional weapons had no effect on enemies that could rewrite matter at the quantum level. Energy weapons only fed the Devourers' power systems. Even nuclear attacks were simply absorbed and converted into computational resources. "Show me the Velthari homeworld situation," Hyojin ordered. The main display shifted to show the Velthari capital system. Once home to 12 billion beings, it had been one of the most beautiful systems in the galaxy. Artificial ring worlds. Orbited twin stars, connected by streams of pure energy that powered a civilization spanning multiple worlds. Now it was gone. The stars still burned, but everything else had vanished. The ring worlds, the energy streams, the massive space stations, even the moons of the outer planets all consumed. In their place floated geometric structures the size of small worlds, their crystalline surfaces pulsing with captured energy. The Velthari government managed to evacuate about 2 million people before the system fell, Kyung-soo reported. They are requesting asylum on Nexari worlds, but the Nexari are too busy evacuating their own population centers. Hyojin felt a pang of sympathy for the proud aliens who had expelled humanity from their precious council. Veltar and his people had ruled their corner of the galaxy for thousands of years. Now they were refugees with nowhere to go. "Any response to our latest offer of protection?" she asked. "Pride Minister Veltar sent a formal reply yesterday," Kyung-soo said, pulling up the message. "He says, and I quote, The Velthari would rather face extinction with honor than survive as human subjects. And the other species? Similar responses, mostly, though some of the smaller governments are beginning to crack. The Free Colonies. Union formally requested human protection yesterday. The Keth Alliance is negotiating terms. Hyjin was not surprised. It was always easier for smaller powers to admit they needed help. They had less pride to lose. The major council species would hold out until the very end, sacrificing their people to preserve their dignity. On the bridge of Truthbearer, Commander Sung Ho monitored the council's emergency broadcasts with a mixture of pity and frustration. The alien leaders were finally beginning to understand what they were facing, but their response was still hopelessly inadequate. "This is Admiral Veltar broadcasting on all emergency frequencies," came the Velthari leader's voice over the communication system. "All available military forces are ordered to converge on the Nexari core worlds. We will make our final stand there." Sung Ho shook his head sadly. "They still think this is a conventional war that can be won through concentrated firepower and brave sacrifices." His communications officer, Jin Wu, looked up from his console. "Sir, we are receiving priority transmissions from 17 different species. They are all requesting immediate evacuation assistance." "Patch them through to Fleet Command," Sung Ho ordered. "Admiral So Jin will want to hear this herself." Back in human space, Admiral So Jin reviewed the incoming requests with mixed emotions. After 2 years of being ignored and insulted, the Galaxy species were finally asking for humanity's help, but it might be too late for many of them. "How many ships do we have available for evacuation operations?" she asked General Wu Jin. "About 300 vessels with sufficient passenger capacity," he replied. "But that will barely make a dent in the billions of beings who need to be relocated." "Do what we can," Sojin ordered. "But priority goes to species that formally request human protection. The others will have to wait." The evacuation operations began immediately, but they revealed the true scope of the crisis. Entire civilizations were trying to flee at once, creating chaos at spaceports and orbital stations. Ships designed to carry hundreds of passengers were packed with thousands. Many beings died in the desperate rush to escape worlds that would soon be consumed. On the Nexari homeworld of Logic Prime, the evacuation was more organized, but no less desperate. The Nexari were natural planners, and they had been preparing for this moment since the first outer colonies fell. But even their careful preparations could not handle the scale of the disaster. Strategic Planner Nexaris stood in the Planetary Command Center, coordinating the movement of 6 billion Nexari to evacuation ships. Her people had built the most efficient society in the galaxy, but efficiency meant nothing against enemies that rewrote the laws of physics. "Status report on the outer defense platforms," she called to her aide. "All platforms report ready, Strategic Planner. 2,000 automated weapon systems, 50 antimatter mines, and the new quantum disruptor array." Nexaris nodded, though she knew it would not be enough. The Devourers had already consumed defenses far more advanced than anything the Nexari possessed. But they had to try. The first Devourer construct appeared at the edge of the system 3 days later. It looked like a geometric pattern made solid, crystalline surfaces arranged in impossible angles, with energy patterns flowing between them in ways that hurt to look at directly. "All weapons, open fire," Nexaris ordered. The Nexari defenses unleashed everything they had. Antimatter explosions lit up space like new stars. Energy beams that could cut through planetary crusts struck the construct from every angle. Quantum disruptors tried to tear apart the bonds that held the enemy's strange matter together. None of it worked. The Devourer construct absorbed every attack, growing larger and more complex with each absorbed energy burst. The antimatter mines fed it power. The energy beams were converted into new construction materials. Even the quantum disruptors only seemed to make it more stable. Then it began to feed. The outermost moon of Logic Prime simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a small rocky satellite with mining operations. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and a slightly larger Devourer construct. "Evacuate all remaining personnel," Nexaris ordered, her voice calm despite the disaster unfolding around them. "Implement Emergency Protocol 7. Emergency Protocol 7 was the complete abandonment of the Nexari homeworld. In a matter of hours, 6 billion beings had to leave behind everything their species had built over millions of years. Most of them did not make it. The Devourer construct moved through the system methodically, consuming planets, moons, space, stations, and ships with equal efficiency. The evacuation fleet managed to escape with perhaps 2 billion Nexari, leaving 4 billion behind to be converted into raw materials for enemy construction projects. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. The Thrakari crystal cities, which had stood for 50,000 years, were dissolved into their component atoms. The Malari garden worlds, where art and beauty had been cultivated as the highest forms of expression, were stripped bare and converted into computational matrices. Even species that had accepted human protection were not entirely safe. The Devourers moved too quickly for humanity to save everyone, and the enemy seemed to be learning from each encounter. "They are adapting," reported Dr. Jun Seo during an emergency meeting of human commanders. "The first constructs we observed were relatively simple. The newer ones are more complex, better defended, and they seem to anticipate our tactics." Admiral So-Jin studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. "Are they learning from the species they consume? Possibly. Or they might have access to information from their previous visit to this galaxy. Either way, they are becoming more dangerous with each system they consume." The scope of the disaster was almost impossible to comprehend. In less than a year, the Great Devourers had consumed a third of galactic civilization. Trillions of beings were dead or missing. Entire species had been wiped out so completely that only their names remained in historical records. And the worst was yet to come. Deep space sensors detected massive movement in the regions. The Fleet Admiral In-Ho stood on the bridge of the massive human dreadnought Redemption, watching as the greatest fleet in galactic history prepared for its final mission. Spread across a light year of space, 200,000 human ships moved, in perfect formation toward the galactic core, where the Great Devourers were building their ultimate weapon. This was not the same humanity that had been expelled from Council space 3 years ago. The humans returning to the galaxy carried weapons that could reshape reality itself, and ships that existed partially outside normal space-time. They were coming not as refugees seeking acceptance, but as the galaxy's only hope for survival. "Status report from all battle groups," In-Ho called to his operations officer. "All groups report ready for combat operations," replied Commander Jae-hyun. "The reality engine ships are fully charged, conventional forces are standing by, and our new allies have taken their assigned positions." The new allies were the remnants of Council species that had finally accepted human authority. The Velthari refugees, led by the humbled Veltar, served as guides through their former territory. Nexari survivors provided tactical analysis and strategic planning. Even some Thrakari crystal beings had joined the fleet, their unique abilities, useful for understanding Devourer technology, but they all served under human command now. Captain Dayun piloted her reality engine ship, Impossible Dream, through a patrol route near the fleet's edge. Her vessel was one of the new superweapon platforms, designed specifically to fight enemies that did not follow normal physical laws. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported her sensor officer. Configuration matches Devourer construct, Class 7. Da-Yun smiled grimly. Class 7 constructs were the size of small moons and had previously been considered unstoppable by Council forces. Time to show them what human creativity could accomplish. All crew, prepare for reality manipulation, she announced over the ship's communication system. We are going to demonstrate why the Devourers should have stayed in dark space. The enemy. Construct detected Impossible Dream and began the process that had destroyed thousands of ships before, converting the local space-time into an energy-draining field that would slowly consume any vessel caught within it. Da-Yun let it try. Instead of fighting the energy drain, she used her reality engine to change what energy meant in the local area. The Devourer's drain suddenly became a source of power, feeding energy back into human systems faster than they could use it. Impossible, transmitted the construct in machine language that human computers had learned to translate. Energy conservation cannot be violated. Energy conservation works fine, Da-Yun replied cheerfully. We just changed the rules about which direction energy flows. She engaged her primary weapon, a reality engine focused through crystalline matrices that could rewrite matter at the quantum level. The Devourer construct, which had been designed to absorb and redirect any form of energy or matter, suddenly found itself trying to process information that made no logical sense. The construct began to change, its geometric perfection warping into impossible shapes that followed human intuition rather than physical law. Within minutes, the moon-sized enemy had been transformed into a work of art, beautiful, harmless, and completely non-functional as a weapon. Target neutralized, Da-Yun reported with satisfaction. Continuing patrol. Similar encounters were taking place across the fleet as human forces demonstrated their new capabilities to enemies that had never faced truly creative opposition. But the real test would come at the galactic core, where the Devourers had been building their ultimate. Project at Admiral So-Jin reviewed the final intelligence reports from her flagship Unity as the fleet approached the core systems. What they found there defied every previous understanding of what was possible. The Devourers have consumed 17 major star systems and are using the mass to construct a single megastructure, reported intelligence analyst Kyung Min. The structure appears to be a computational matrix of unimaginable complexity. The holographic display showed the true scope of Devourer ambition. They had built a network of crystalline processors that stretched across multiple solar systems, connected by streams of pure energy and exotic matter. It was computing on a scale that could simulate entire universes. What are they computing? Asked General Wu Jin. Unknown, but the power requirements suggest they are trying to solve some kind of universal equation. Perhaps the mathematics that govern reality itself. So Jin felt a chill run down her spine. If they succeed in mapping the fundamental laws of the universe, they could rewrite reality on a galactic scale, Kyung-min confirmed. Transform matter and energy according to their will rather than natural law. How long until they complete their project? Based on current construction rates, approximately 6 months. The fleet had arrived just in time. Any longer, and the Devourers would have gained power that could eliminate human advantages entirely. "Signal all commands," Sojin ordered. "We attack in 72 hours, and this time we fight to win." The battle plan that humanity had developed was unlike anything in military history. Traditional tactics were useless against enemies that could absorb conventional weapons and redirect energy attacks. Instead, the humans would fight with imagination, creativity, and the fundamental unpredictability of conscious will. Reality. Engineer Boram reviewed her mission parameters one final time. She would be leading a team of specialists in a direct assault on the main Devourer processing center, the heart of their computational network. "Remember," she told her team, "we are not trying to destroy their computers. We are trying to make them think thoughts that will cause them to destroy themselves." "How do we make a machine intelligence think destructive thoughts?" asked Sergeant Min-wook. "We introduce paradoxes, contradictions, and logical impossibilities into their data stream," Boram explained. "Machine intelligences cannot handle information that cannot be processed logically. Human minds can accept contradictions and find meaning in chaos, but artificial minds break down when faced with truly random data." The attack began with humanity's conventional forces engaging the outer ring of Devourer defenses. These were not intended to win, but to draw attention and resources away from the real targets. Captain Da Yun led a squadron of reality engine ships in what appeared to be a standard attack formation. The Devourer constructs moved to intercept them, following defensive patterns based on millions of years of combat experience. But experience meant nothing when the enemy refused to follow the rules that experience was based on. Da Yun's ship suddenly existed in 17 different locations simultaneously, each one firing weapons that converted enemy matter into music, mathematics, and pure emotion. The Devourers tried to analyze and counter these attacks, but their processing systems could not handle data that was more art than science. Across the battle zone, human forces demonstrated the creativity that had made them too dangerous for the old Galactic Council. Ships that fought by turning enemy weapons into flowers, soldiers who walked through solid matter by convincing atoms to become permeable, engineers who repaired battle damage by reversing the flow of time in localized areas. But the real battle was taking place deep within the Devourer network, where Boram's team had penetrated to the central processing core. "This is incredible," whispered Dr. Huan Su as they moved through corridors made of crystallized computation. "They have turned pure mathematics into physical structure. Every surface is simultaneously matter and information, which makes them vulnerable to our kind of thinking," Boram replied, activating her portable reality engine. "Mathematics has to follow rules, but human creativity does not." She began introducing impossible equations into the Devourer data stream. Mathematical problems with no solutions, geometric shapes that could not exist in three-dimensional space, logical statements that were simultaneously true and false. The effect was immediate and devastating. The crystalline corridors around them began to shift and change as the Devourer processing systems tried to make sense of information that made no sense. Walls became floors, floors became ceilings, and ceilings became something that had no name in any language. "The whole network is destabilizing," reported Sergeant Min-wook, watching his instruments show readings that should have been impossible. "Their computational matrix is trying to process our paradoxes and getting trapped in infinite loops. Throughout, The megastructure. Similar teams were introducing chaos into order, creativity into logic, and human unpredictability into machine precision. The Devourers had built their network to handle any conceivable data input, but they had never conceived of beings who could think impossible thoughts and make them real. The collapse started slowly, then accelerated as paradoxes spread through the network like a virus. Processing centers that had operated flawlessly for millions of years suddenly began producing random outputs. Construction projects ground to a halt as building materials were converted into abstract concepts rather than physical structures. Within hours, the greatest computational project in galactic history had become a monument to the power of creative chaos over logical order. President Sung-min stood at the observation deck of the mobile capital ship New Dawn, watching the reconstruction of a galaxy that humanity now protected. 2 years had passed since the defeat of the Great Devourers, and the transformation had been remarkable. What had once been a collection of suspicious competing species was becoming something that had never existed before, a truly unified galactic civilization. The ship itself was a symbol of the new order. Rather than establishing a fixed capital, on a single world, humanity had built a massive vessel that could travel to any system in the galaxy within days. It carried representatives from 47 different species, all working together under human leadership to rebuild their shattered worlds. "Status report on the reconstruction projects," Sung-min called to his chief administrator. "Excellent progress across all sectors," replied Director Hai-wan, a former Border Patrol commander who had proven surprisingly good at managing civilian operations. "The new Velthari colonies have reached 80% of their target population. The Nexari research stations are back online and contributing to our technology development programs. Even the Thrakari have agreed to share their crystal-growing techniques with other species." Seung-min nodded with satisfaction. The integration had not been easy, but it was working better than anyone had expected. The key had been treating the former council species as partners rather than conquered enemies. Humanity provided protection and advanced technology, while each species contributed their unique skills and knowledge to the common good. On the rebuilt world of New Velthar, former Prime Minister Veltar supervised the construction of what would become the galaxy's largest cultural preservation center. The proud Velthari had lost their homeworld and most of their population, but they had found a new purpose in protecting the heritage of all species. "The Molari art collections have been fully catalogued," reported his assistant, a young Velthari named Siltra. "We also received permission to create holographic copies of the Thrakari song crystals before the originals were damaged." Veltar nodded gravely. The former council leader had aged considerably since the Devourer War, but he had gained something he had never possessed before: humility. Working under human authority had taught him that true leadership meant serving others rather than commanding them. "Any word from the human administrators about our request for expanded facilities?" he asked. "President Sung-min approved the expansion yesterday," Siltra replied. "He said that preserving galactic culture is one of humanity's highest priorities." Veltar smiled sadly. 3 years ago, he would have scoffed at the idea that humans cared about alien culture. Now he knew that humanity's commitment to protecting other species extended far beyond military defense. In the Nexari Research Complex on Logic Station, strategic planner Nexaris worked alongside human scientists to develop new applications for reality engine technology. The integration of Nexari logic with human creativity had produced breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. The efficiency improvements are remarkable, she reported to Dr. Junseo during their daily coordination meeting. Your reality engines can now maintain stable operation for 60% longer when combined with our optimization algorithms. And your strategic planning programs work much better when they account for human unpredictability, Junseo replied, with a smile. It turns out that the chaos you use to complain about is actually a valuable resource when properly channeled. Nexaris had to agree. Her people had spent millennia trying to eliminate randomness and uncertainty from their calculations. Working with humans had taught her that sometimes the unexpected was exactly what a situation needed. The transformation was not limited to the major species. Throughout the galaxy, smaller civilizations that had never had a voice in galactic affairs were thriving under human protection. The Keth Alliance had expanded from 3 systems to 15. The Free Colonies Union was building new trade routes that connected previously isolated worlds. Even species that had barely achieved space travel were receiving human technology and guidance to help them develop. But the most important changes were happening on the frontiers, where Commander Haiwan's patrol fleets maintained the reality, anchors that prevented another devourer incursion. Border status report, Haiwan called to her sensor operator as their patrol ship Vigilant Guardian approached the galactic rim. All anchor points show green status, reported Lieutenant Dong Jin. The reality barriers are stable and operating at full efficiency. The reality anchors were humanity's greatest achievement, a network of devices that made it impossible for enemies like the Devourers to enter normal space-time anywhere near the galaxy. Based on architect technology and improved by human creativity, they created zones where the laws of physics were reinforced and protected against outside manipulation. Any signs of activity beyond the barriers? Haiwan asked. Negative, Commander. Deep space sensors show no unusual readings. Haiwan nodded but remained alert. The surviving Devourers had retreated to dark space between galaxies, but humanity's intelligence services believed they were regrouping for another attempt. The next attack might not come for centuries, but it would come eventually. Continue monitoring, she ordered, and remember, eternal vigilance is the price of galactic freedom. Back on New Dawn, President Seung-min was meeting with representatives from the newest members of humanity's protective alliance. The delegation included beings from 12 species that had never been part of the old Galactic Council, smaller civilizations that were finally getting their chance to participate in galactic affairs. We are honored by humanity's protection, said Ambassador Techmore of the Spiral Arm Federation. But we wonder what you expect from us in return. The same thing we expect from everyone, Seung-min replied simply. Cooperation, honesty, and a willingness to help other species when they need it. We are not building an empire. We are building a community. But surely you must benefit somehow from protecting so many species, pressed Representative Quintel from the Outer Ring Coalition. What does humanity gain from this arrangement? Seung-min was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain something that even many humans found difficult to understand. Finally, he spoke. We gain the knowledge that we are doing the right thing. 3 years ago, the galaxy rejected us because they thought we were too chaotic and unpredictable. They were afraid of our creativity and our refusal to follow established rules. But those same qualities are what allowed us to defeat the Devourers when traditional methods failed. He gestured toward the viewing port where dozens of different ship designs could be seen. Human vessels working alongside Velthari art ships, Nexari research platforms, and vessels from dozens of other species. This is what we gain, he continued. A galaxy where every species can contribute their unique strengths instead of hiding them, where creativity is valued over conformity, where helping others is more important than maintaining hierarchies. The alien representatives exchanged glances. This was not the answer they had expected from the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful military force. You truly ask for nothing more than cooperation? Asked Tekmor. Nothing more, Seung-min confirmed. Though we do hope that if humanity ever needs help in the future, our friends will remember what we did for them. In the years that followed, the new galactic order proved its strength in ways both large and small. When the Corvin crystal cities were threatened by solar flares, human reality engine ships modified local space-time to protect them. When a plague threatened the agricultural worlds of the Malari, Nexari medical analysis combined with human intuition to find a cure. When pirates attacked the trade routes of the smaller species, joint fleets from multiple civilizations worked together to stop them. The old Galactic Council had been built on fear, competition, and rigid hierarchy. The new alliance was built on trust, cooperation, and the understanding that diversity made everyone stronger. But perhaps the most important change was in how conflicts were resolved. The old council had ruled through force and intimidation, imposing their will on smaller species and suppressing dissent. The human-led alliance used mediation, compromise, and creative problem-solving to find solutions that worked for everyone. When the Thrakari and the Zephyrian collective disagreed about mining rights in a disputed system, human mediators helped them find a solution that gave both species what they needed. When refugees from the Devourer War competed for settlement rights on new worlds, careful planning ensured that everyone had a place to call home. The key is to remember that every problem has multiple solutions, explained diplomatic liaison Min Jun during a training session for new mediators. The old council looked for single answers that could be imposed on everyone. We look for creative compromises that give each party something they value. As the 5th anniversary of the Devourer War approached, President Seung-min prepared to address the Galactic Assembly, the democratic body that had replaced the old council's autocratic rule. Representatives,